I know there are alien craft here from another planet. I saw other ones, but I was inside one. I know it was not made on Earth. I know it was made with materials that we cannot fabricate, we cannot duplicate, and we've never been able to. I know it uses a power source that's so advanced that we could only dream of something along those lines, and the energy density on it is phenomenal. It's nothing that I would ever expect to see. Um, I know that this is done in the highest levels of security, and that they use all kinds of methods to keep it quiet, from disinformation to uh, I mean, some exotic ways of just hiding things. Like I said, the installation itself was buried in the side of a mountain, and I also know that there's lots of nonsense information that has gone around, and whether it was started by the Navy or military or whoever's at the absolute bottom, of the project. And I truly suspect that be the case because, look, disinformation is the most powerful, way to distort facts. You just throw a bunch of useless stuff out there, and they just take the real facts along with the nonsense and bundle it together and say, well, this is just impossible, and there, your security is maintained. But I also know that at some point they've examined or had bodies of alien creatures somewhere. So I know that stuff for a fact. And that's the bottom line.
A lot of information has come out since Bob Lazar first came forward in 1989 with his sport model and S4 story. And while his story has never changed, we really know nothing more now than we did then, other than the government now admits to UAPs and UFOs while of course denying anything else. The next clip you're about to see is a very rare one, in that a person who saw a UFO decides to hit it with a laser pointer. And well, you have to see what happens next.
Oh, here's another one right here. You see him? Flying right over our heads. Pointing it right at him. And now he's turning.
Ooh,
yeah.
It just flashed.
Yeah, you see him?
Yeah, it just flashed.
I'm lasering or at him, and he's curving. Shit.
That was what went on at the White House. And I tell people a lot of times, I'm glad I did it. I spent those 4 years there, but I won't do it again. Every day is dog eat dog. It goes on every day. Many times I have threats made at the policy meetings. We're going to get you. Good. Get me. Let's see if you get who gets who first. I had asked, they thought they had destroyed the security files, but they hadn't. Special intelligence of the Army had copies of all of them. One of these men would threaten me. I'd call the Pentagon. Courier would deliver the files to me. Example, one day one of these men was talking. He was pontificating. So I interrupted him. Can I say something? And I was chairman of the policy group. He said, yes. What is it? I'm very interested in what you're saying, because last night I read a book that sort of followed what you're saying. He said, you did? Yes. You know what the name of the book was? He said, what? Karl Marx. I think if he had a gun, he'd have shot me. He changed colors and everything, because he knew what I meant. I called him that label I put on him. Then I called CIA, the deputy director. I told him, don't send any of these Marxists to me anymore. I'll chase them out of my committee. I told him, send me Americans. You got a lot of them over there. Send me Americans, not these Marxist people. I don't like them. I don't want them near here. You shouldn't say that, he said. I told him, I am saying it. You send those Marxists to me, I'll put them out. They won't, I have the authority to put them off of the committee. You won't be represented. So you better send me Americans. From then on, they were sending pretty good men over. But now this went on every day. When I would call on the files, one particular man, I remember, he was talking and talking and talking. So finally I said, you know, Hitler was not a bad guy. He turned white. He knew I'd read his security file where he said that. And then I'd go out to security, and I knew the people real well. We suspended about a dozen of them. Number 2 on McCarthy's list, I finally got him, and he vowed he was going to get me. And he was suspended and fired from State Department. Nobody knew about this. It wasn't done like McCarthy did it. It was all done behind the scenes. So the White House job wasn't as rosy as people think it was. This infighting went on constantly. But I'm glad I went through it for the 4 years. I used to tell my wife that she'd see me go in the morning, and she'd say, what are you going to do today, Phil? Save the world? I'd laugh at her. I'd go, well, she said, remember, maybe the world doesn't want to be saved. I thought, well, maybe you're right. And my wife used to say that to me. Oh. And it was true. A lot of the things I saw and happened, I figured, well, maybe the world doesn't want to be saved. And we were deteriorating. We were going downhill. We were favoring the communists every way you can think. We offered them at the Department of Commerce, a lot of our commerce, a lot of our secrets, free of charge. This group was oriented that way. So you see what was happening in our own government. Now, I always tell people, inside this part of the government, you can see out, but the people cannot see in what's going on in there, because everything had a classification on it. I personally had 9 clearances in addition to top secret. So you know how many stupid clearances were around that you couldn't talk about. Clearance after clearance. Every place you went, you'd run up against this. This was done purposely. So the people that really controlled the government, their actions were hidden. A lot of these clearances were hopeless, no good. I went up took a lie detector test on the top floor of the Pentagon, and I came down. General said, what'd you do, Phil? I told him, I thought I was in jail. They closed 2 jail gates around me and put me in this room and interrogated me with a lot of questions. I told him, what goes on, General, with that outfit? He said, well, did they clear you? I don't know, General. Well, I got cleared, and that brought 2 other clearances with it, even a satellite clearance in those days. So the classification system was bad. And that classification system also was applied to UFOs, things you couldn't talk about. So why? I ran across things that were classified, highly classified, and I used to say, what's this classified for? To keep it from American people? The communists know all about this. Who are we keeping it from? Enemy or our own people? They didn't care. They actually hid it. And you'd be surprised how many times this happened. Now, that was a shadow government. So, you see, this battle went on every day. I don't tend to tell you that all the people on my side fought this battle and got out unscathed. They didn't. A lot of good people got hurt in this fight. It was almost like a war within a war. A lot of my friends were suspended on phony charges. And this happened quite often. So this is a war that you never see. One of my books that I just wrote is titled The Top Secret War Within the Government. And this went on every day. Now, you can see when I tell you these things, the UFO material was of little consequence in these terms. But it also fell in that area and was hidden from all of you. They didn't want anybody to know these things. They could use as a weapon and scare you when they wanted to. And this is not that I say they. I gave the committee every one of their names. That's why I go back, and I told them the first time in my life that I had the good Lord answer my prayer in a hurry. He never done that for me before. But it happened that time. And I figured, well, maybe there's somebody after all on my side. But we finally whipped them. Now I think it's a lot better. Of course, a lot of times I got to question what people like Clinton and some around him do. But it's not the way it was before. A lot of those people have lost their authority in their positions. They're not around anymore. A lot of my friends aren't around anymore. So it happened. So the Borgias used to throw people in the Tiber River. There were some bodies found in the Tiber River in Washington. You never heard about them, but there were. And maybe the makeup I had, I love this type of fight. And I think I thrived on it. I loved the challenge from them. When they used to tell me we were going to get you, oh, that was not fun. I thought, good, let's see who gets who. They had nothing on me. I had confidential funds for the Army, destroy my vouchers every 3 months, and I'm proud to say, never did a penny stick to my hand that wasn't mine. I accounted for every penny. My CIC, I used to give them their funds. The general told me one time, we know who to trust. That was part of, I think, my strength. They couldn't get anything on me. CIA, one time, a friend of mine said, a man like you surely has a stash hidden away. CIA is looking for it. I told him, good. Tell them when they find it to let me know so I can go get it. Because I don't know where it is. The Chicago Tribune interviewed me and wrote part of this story, a whole page way back in the 50s. And it was printed actually the Tribune. The Washington representative was a good friend of mine, and he interviewed me. And he put in there that when I retired, my bank account showed less than $200, and I had 2 children sent to school, and nothing saved. Because Washington is an expensive city to live in. For example, when they assigned me to the White House, I had no civilian clothes. I'd been in the Army all these years. I'd been in the Army by then over 10 years, 12. I had no civilian clothes. They called me in one day and said, Phil, we hate to say this, you can't wear a uniform or you have to wear civilian clothes. I think I had about $300 in the bank. I had to go spend it all to get civilian clothes to wear at the White House, because we didn't wear a uniform there most of the time. So from outside it couldn't be distinguished who was military and who wasn't. So those 4 years I never wore my uniform. Once in a while I'd put it on. And I used to discuss this with a lot of congressmen, because we had a lot of good senators in those days and a lot of good congressmen. And in the book, there's this Russian, Fedai. He was at the Library of Congress, a good friend of mine. And he and I used to give lectures. We gave a lecture at the board of directors of Gulf Oil to Standard Oil. And what we would do, he would take the part of the Communist Politburo, and I would take the part of the U.S. Politburo. And we'd challenge each other. And they loved that, you know, because we would actually quote real policy, real Soviet policy, real U.S. policy, and show how it dovetailed. They were actually working together. That's why in the book a lot of times I say that the KGB was controlling a lot of that. They were buddies. When I was in Rome, and I started arrest. In those days, it was known as the NKVD. General called me in one day. Telegram came from Washington that I would quit arresting the communist agents because we weren't at war with them. Yet they were agitating constantly to destroy us. So I told the general, he got angry. He was an ex-paratrooper. Dasher was his name. I told him, General Dasher, I won't disobey orders. But sure in hell, I'm going to stretch him. So what I did, I kept arresting them. As they'd come into Rome, I'd pick them up. Because my fiscal agents and all, and the secret police knew every time they came here. I would arrest them, I'd put them in my prison, interrogate them, work them over a little bit, spread the word on the underground that I had them, and they sung like canaries. Then we turned them loose. I never picked up the same man twice. They would get rid of them immediately. When I found out I actually had him in jail and then we interrogated him and got everything out of him. So I didn't disobey orders, but I stretched it a lot, and they quit coming in. So we stopped all agitation. And I got rid of the Gestapo, SS there. So in the last year, I had it pretty nice in Rome. I didn't know how I did it, but I did it some way. Because I told Pope Paul, I challenge your Lord and mine. Because I told him, what did he do, put me here as a joke? This is his eternal city, not mine. I told him, I don't know what to do, but I'll give you your city back better than it ever was. And we did. I had 60 counterintelligence agents, a lot of them were ex-FBI. I had 30 British field security agents. I had a 10 police detachment and 12 custom guards. And they were good men. We cleaned that city up. I gave my men orders one day, and if Washington had found this out, I think they'd have hung me. My orders were to my men, you tap a Gestapo killer or an SS or KGB in the back of the head with your gun, you count 3. At 3, if he doesn't have his hands up, you blow his damn head off. Because at 4, he got his gun out and you're dead. I don't want any of you killed. I didn't lose a one. I arrested 2 Gestapo colonels one day. And I told them, you were armed, why didn't you resist? They said, the moment we got the tap on the back, we realized the streets were deserted, you had us. And we put our hands up. We knew about your 3-second rule. Now, these were killers. Look what they did. And I figured, they're animals? Well, Chief of Police of Italy and the Prime Minister told me one time, this is not play. These are the drugs. You can't show sign of, being nice to them is a sign of weakness. You can't afford that. They'll blow your head off. If you believe in fair play, you better go home now. They were right. You couldn't play fair with these people. So I played the game like they did. Maybe I'll have to pay for that someday. But my job was to destroy them. They were killers. They were animals. And this Gestapo colonel said, how many guns did you have on us? 20. There was guns, rifles in each window. I told them there were agents on every corner. They said, we thought so, because the moment we got the tap on the back, we realized the streets were deserted, you had us. There wasn't a civilian or anybody on the street, we cleaned them all out, because we figured there'd be shooting. So this is one of the stories of the Gestapo in Rome. Now, and then I came back to Washington, and I'm fighting a similar battle. But there was a difference. I couldn't use a gun and a knife anymore. I figured, isn't it a pity? I got to fight these people almost by word of mouth now, and threats and security. Over there was different. I told even Pope Paul one day, I told him, I can't come in the Vatican, but up to your walls, I'm in charge. So whether you like it or not, you're under my protection. I even told Pope Pius this. I was called 3 times by Pope Pius, and one day my liaison officer told me, he said, I told him, well, how's come, this is my 3rd visit to Pope Pius, how's come he always tells me the same thing? Asked me about my liaison officer, said, why, you stupid Americans. He said, anybody in the world would give anything to meet a pope like you do one-on-one, just you two. I told him, well, I told him, Mario, maybe you're right. We are hicks yet. And I wrote in my latest book when I was writing about the extraterrestrial, and I put in that, 3 times I had the honor of meeting Pope Pius. I dealt with Pope Paul once a week. He was acting Secretary of State at the time. His name was Monsignor Martini. I used to deal with him at least once a week. And I figured I'd be foolish to say they didn't influence me in my beliefs, because they did, meeting people like that. So this is some of the things I learned in Rome, and I came home and the war didn't end. So that's, everybody says, oh, Jesus, you were at the White House. What a high position. I told them, don't wish that on anybody. Look what goes on now, even the White House aides and things. Well, I didn't mean it that way. You women are laughing. That wasn't the way we fought the battles in those days. Anyway, my wife would have hit me on the head. Yeah, she passed away a couple of years ago. We were married 53 years. So this is the story. I hope I got it. This story, by the way, you won't see it in any books or magazines. It was never written, because unless you're a part of it, you didn't even know what was going on. Everybody every day go about their business. Nobody knew that this inside battle was destroying people, destroying characters and everything constantly. So that's the story of the shadow government. And now I look back, I'm glad I went through it, but I won't do it again if I had my say. Now let's go back to the UFOs.
I think we have time for one more question. No, I'm kidding, that's a joke. Next question. We've got time.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for being a real American hero. They're rare. You have addressed the enormous budgets of the various alphabet soups of agencies in this country, as well as the different branches of the military. It seems perhaps there is both the covert things that are done and the overt things that are done. Could you address this in light of some of the information we've heard in regard to underground bases, joint treaties with extraterrestrial civilizations, and how that might tie into the Philadelphia experiment and Montauk experiments?
Other nations. What do you say?
It's a good question.
Could you repeat that last part?
Could you address, from what you know personally, the potential of underground bases and cities and treaties with extraterrestrial civilizations, as well exchanges of technology, and how that fits into the Philadelphia experiments and Montauk experiments?
Underground bases, Area 51, Montauk, and the Philadelphia.
Yeah, okay, I'll answer that the best I can. In my opinion, because I knew what was going on there, Area 51 is greatly exaggerated what you read in the books and newspapers. Yes, we kept a lot of our projects secret, which we should. A lot of the B-2 was made, the stealth there. But what they say, the the aliens there and meeting here and meeting. That's not so. As far as Philadelphia experiment, I had the privilege of knowing personally and discussing this with Admiral Arleigh Burke. He was Chief of Staff at the time. Arleigh Burke was known as the Pacific as the destroyer commander. And I discussed the Philadelphia experiment with him. It happened, but one serious thing happened. When they turned on the degaussers, the purpose was to move the ships away from mines sunk into the ocean, magnetic mines. When they turned the degaussers on, they turned 4 of them on. The ship did disappear and changed over. Tesla, in the early 90s, had conducted similar experiments. He was making things disappear from tables and moving over here, and when he take the energy away from it, they go back. But one mistake they made, they never figured they'd kill the crew, too. Those experiments killed the crews. Dangerous. Just like I told you about the lasers. We had to watch the laser weapons. They could blind our own men. When you do that, you got troubles. Montauk was part of that. There was some work done at Montauk. That was when I talk about von Neumann, his area. The crystal valve he talks about. That was really the transistor we talk about. And to add on to what you asked, the underground bases, at least I'd say better than 90% fabrication. They don't exist. The only one I know exists was a mountain in Virginia where we're going to move the government in case of a nuclear attack. On the Arctic, no such thing. And I think I would have known. I had access to about everything. I could call any reports at the White House that I needed and wanted. And if they existed, I think I'd have got some indication. At least one report. I never got any. So in my opinion, known with my experience and what I'd seen and what I knew and the people I knew, how's come all these intelligence people never heard of them either? It couldn't be hidden from us. It could be hidden from somebody who wasn't cleared and not in the loop. They don't exist. These are fabrications. One man came to see me one time and he insisted there were bases in the Arctic, down south. And well, I did something to him, he got scared off, I never saw him again. There were no bases there. And I couldn't have been in an area where I never saw. I was right in where the people would know. And not only that, in other services. I had good friends in intelligence and clearances like I had. We used to talk about it. It wouldn't have been the Navy, it wouldn't have been the Air Force or anybody. They weren't there. Montauk was real. There was some things happened there way back. There was talk it came from flying saucers. I went up to the Montauk area one day and I was taken to a building 7 stories high, solid concrete. This building was filled with computers and tubes 3 and 4 feet high. Temperature every day 72 degrees. If the temperature fell, it would destroy everything in there. They had to keep it constant. Now that entire building, one little wee computer on a watch can do more than that building used to do. That's how far we advanced. So there were installations like that around, which were subject to a lot of exaggeration, what they really did. Because you couldn't enter that building if you didn't have the clearances. So the legend spreads. The mystery spreads. And people like mysteries and legends. No, I don't know if any existed. If I did, I'd tell you. I never saw reports. It's just like I told you today on the EB report that it was 200 years old. One report I had. I can't verify that that was true. You can't go with one report. You can keep it in mind if something else matches. Just like I told you when I saw the extraterrestrial in Fort Riley. I put it in the back of my head until I could verify and corroborate it, which I did 10 years later. You see, you have to think of things like that. And the trained intelligence officer works like that. So I don't blame a lot of people for getting confused, because these stories are made up and they sound so real. And you almost figure it has to be. It sounds real. It's not. Just like I told you, my co-writer, when I answered him, quit watching X-Files and don't bother me anymore with such questions. Those files in the basement don't exist. They never have. It isn't like that. So he was quoting, wanting me to answer questions from fiction and put them in the book. Well, we never did, because I warned him about that. So it's just like these movies that you see, Star Wars and these other movies. They're based on some fact. Yes, they are, but a small percentage. Then the writers take over and the producers and all, and the prop people, and they make it look real. And they're entertaining. I watch some of them. But they're entertaining, but it's not reality. I wish we were that good. We're not. And like I say, the mistake, and we have to do this, we have to take this on as a new science. Forget NASA and everything. Let them do what they want. Let them spend the money if we can afford it. But the new science has to be created, and this has to come from the same way we pulled it up. And we just did a small part. We didn't do a big, great.
Thank you.
We did do some advances, but not as much as we should have done. Of course, a lot of people say that's hindsight. Yes. And also another thing to remember, ladies and gentlemen, I had the title of Chief of Foreign Technology Division. But that was a secondary job for me. That wasn't my main job. And people can understand that something so important, and that wasn't your only job. And no, it wasn't. I had to attend hearings. I had to prepare budgets. I had to visit industries. The UFO as Chief of Foreign Technology was only one part of my duties. I had so many other things to do. The general made me project officer of the anti-missile missile. And he told me, don't say you're too busy. You're going to do it anyway. And then when you get it started, recommend somebody take your place. So I had a lot of those things on hand. So I tell people, don't ever imagine that this UFO artifacts that I was working on is in the book. That wasn't my primary job. I didn't spend I spent maybe not even half of my time on that. So you see the way the military operates. Sometimes the budget was so important that I had to forget all about UFOs. Because without a budget, we didn't operate. I had to appear in front of Congress. And ladies and gentlemen, I won't wish that anybody to go up at a hearing in front of the Senate and Congress. You don't know what you're up against. You get in there and you figure, my God, what am I doing here? How can these people be so damn dumb? But it's part of the world and you have to live with it. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody to go up there. My friends that became generals, and they used to hate the budget and go up on Capitol Hill and testify to prove their budget. So what they do, the Department of Defense was smart. They made the books on the budget so damn thick and complicated that nobody could figure out what they wanted. I used to go up and see budget hearings, books this thick. Well, who can read them? I'm sure some of those senators and congressmen didn't. They were too busy getting elected all the time and raising funds. So that's a reality of the government. And I say this with regret that that was not even my primary job. Now, when you read the book, you figure, Jesus, He did a fine job, or people say you had courage. And there was no courage to it. That wasn't my primary operation. It was important, yes. And now when I look back, maybe that was the most important thing I did. I wish I could have put more time in it. I wish I could have corrected some of the mistakes I made. Now, I'm going to give you an example. I told you about the little piece of metal I had. That piece of metal was paper thin. So a general called me in one day and he said, Phil, I got a project and you're going to be the head of it. And he handed me this piece of metal. He said, this is bigger than Los Alamos, the atomic bomb thing. He said, this piece of metal is atomically aligned, paper thin, so strong, we make spaceships light as a feather. Radiation, space debris can't penetrate them. So he gave me that job. Pick any engineers you want. If you find any industry that's even working in that direction, finance them. I never found one. Even the German scientists were with me, von Braun's people. We never found any. We failed. Now, that was an important project. It would have made all our weapons obsolete. If you have an automobile, it would last a lifetime. Now they're starting the line mill. And when you line the atoms, and Lincoln Labs reported this, and you turn those atoms this way, it becomes transparent. Now science is working on it and doing it. They use yttrium, one of the rare earths. The material is solid. They treat it with some chemicals, and it turns transparent. Take the treatment away, it goes back to its normal state. That's going on now. Science has actually advanced that far since my day. But the thing that bothers me is on the transistors integrated circuit, I think we've reached the end of the line. And I hope that they give us another one to work with, because it might take 200 years to reach this point if we don't have them.
Colonel, let's take another question.
Thank you very much, Colonel. I enjoy your candor. The question I have is a little bit off the track. Every 33 years, the Earth passes through a dust cloud in our solar system, and we receive a lot of material into the atmosphere, many meteorites and so forth. This is, apparently it's going to occur in November of 1998 again, and it would place the last time it occurred about 1965, when you were in your heaviest involvement, I would guess, with the military, with technologies that would be very sensitive to these types of interferences and the dust that was created. Do you have any experience with that? Did you find that?
Well, I didn't get close to that. I think it's hearing aid of mine.
He's talking about a dust cloud that the Earth passes into what year?
Every 33 years, so 1965 would have been the last time we passed through it.
65 was the last time when you were working on
Yes.
this.
No, I have to be honest, I don't know anything about it. I left the Army, I retired in '63. And I sort of, and I became at the time the Washington representative of a big firm. So I didn't get involved in a lot of that for those first 2 or 3 years. And then later, I started to become a consultant, and I did get involved in some of this. But I never knew that cloud that the Earth passed through. No, sorry, I got to tell you just what I know.
Well, thank you very much. Anyway.
Yeah, I can't tell you that I know, I don't.
Next question.
Hello, I'd like to know if any of the bodies of the extraterrestrial bodies that were found in the crashes were still alive.
I didn't get that either.
Were any of the bodies of the EVs still alive in the crashes?
Let me explain that to you. Lately, I was having lunch with my personal doctor. He is working on he's an expert on the lymphatic system and others. And I just did this, just put it on paper, and I showed it to everybody. And I had partially answered this before. He asked me the same question. He said, Phil, do any of these bodies still exist? I told him, unfortunately, no. He said, why? I told him, we weren't advanced enough to know what propagates this alien being, what makes him survive. Well, once you remove him from the electromagnetic envelope, his environment is gone. He can't propagate. Same with his flying saucer. Same as a human being. Take his nourishment away, extinction, death. He doesn't last long. These EVs don't eat, they don't drink water, they don't breathe oxygen. So they deteriorate fast once you take their nourishment away. His nourishment is the electromagnetic envelope around the flying saucer. The same for the flying saucer. No, there isn't one, unfortunately. They deteriorated fast.
Thank you.
Hello. Over the years, I've familiarized myself a little bit with this information, and according to Project Blue Book, which is a part of Project Grudge, between the years of 1947 and 1953, there were 17 crashes, and 55 alien bodies were recovered, and this was all around the Four Corners area. In 1953 alone, 10 more discs crashed, and they recovered 26 more bodies. And in 1949, 2 discs crashed near Roswell, and of the 5 alien bodies that were on the ship, 1 was found alive and wandering around in the desert. He was codenamed EB, and he was called an extraterrestrial biological entity. He was alive from 1947 until 1952, at which time he died. He had been taken to Los Alamos. Now, all of these, there was such an alien problem at this time that Eisenhower, well, not Eisenhower, it was in 1947, they created the National Security Council to deal with this alien problem, and you said that you served on the National Security Council under the Eisenhower administration. Does any of this information ring a bell?
She's talking about Project Grudge and Project Blue Book,
Yeah.
and how there was an enormous number of aliens reported, some alive, most dead, and an enormous number of ships that had crashed over the years. And being part of NSA, is this something you recognize?
I had NSA clearance. I had their whole system available to me. As far as NSA getting in the operation of the extraterrestrials and all, no. It wasn't their mission. Their mission was codes, intercepts, and so forth. I used to get their intercepts and codes. I had the clearances. The extraterrestrials and flying saucers was not there. The only thing that I know about NSA in this area, NSA was receiving organized, orderly radio transmissions from space. They weren't space noise, they weren't static. They were organized radio signals. But they were never able to decode them. We don't know where they came from or what they were saying to us. Unfortunately, that's it. They weren't involved. As far as all the information at Blue Book was a poor example of a cover-up. You said Project Grudge. I could very easily name a dozen such projects. I don't know of any that were worth much. A lot of it was just going through the exercises. We never paid any attention to them. People used to ask me, all the UFO sightings, did you ever see a UFO in the air? Did you ever? No, I'm not interested. UFOs flying around. My interest is what's inside that UFO. If I can't see the inside, I'm not interested. Let them fly around. So, I've been asked that question. A lot of those sightings that you say was saw, I question them very much. I question most of those. The EB bodies, I question the numbers. I had access to the information. I never knew of that many.
Well,
There weren't more total. I never had information that there were more than 8 or 9 or 10. There weren't the large quantities of bodies. I wish they were available. We didn't have them. The Air Force have them. 1949, Air Force only was in existence 1 year. They were a fledgling service. They had no research. General Twining admitted that. As late as '52, the Air Force research and development wasn't worth much. Neither was the Army research and development. In 1952, Army R&D was under logistics, a secondary mission. That's where I was fortunate. The artifacts that I got, and people don't know this, a CIC man picked them up at Roswell, a Jeep load. The CIC is not an entity in itself that operates. When I had the CIC in Rome, for operation, they're 100% under the G2, the intelligence chief. My CIC in Rome did not operate independently. They were under me. I was the operation man. I called the shots. The CIC, when he got the Jeep, he had to send those artifacts direct to the intelligence service. He was under them for operational control. People don't know this. All CIC is, the Counterintelligence Corps, administration they have. Administratively they have an outfit, but operationally they don't. They're not in the operation business. They're told what to do by the Chief of Intelligence. So that's most of the story on that part. What I think happened, General Twining in '52 said it wasn't worth much, Air Force. They were only 4 years old. They couldn't have created a good research agency in that time. Research a lot of times takes time. You do some research projects that have to be financed 4 or 5 years or longer. A lot of the companies, the big corporations, we were a little concerned because they weren't interested in spending their money on research. All they were interested in was their pocketbooks, because a short-term product improvement pays dividends maybe in 4 or 5 months. Research might not pay off in 10 years. So the board of directors who had all the stocks, they were looking after their pocketbook, the dollar. If they got research money, they didn't get any returns. Product improvement, they made money. But we were concerned about this because the Japanese were creeping ahead of us. Our research was going by the boards. And how I know this, they constantly came to us and wanted research money, and we wouldn't give it to them. And this was constant. They tried to get our research money. They used state-of-the-art as an excuse. They had cost overruns all the time. And as far as Blue Book and all those, I never read that Blue Book. They weren't worth reading. I knew what happened, how it was composed. It wasn't composed on fact by a group of people who weren't trained in the business. They didn't care. All they were told was kill it some way. This Blue Book thing was just one step above the dummy thing that happened last year. It wasn't anything to take serious. We never took it serious. We didn't waste our time with that. We had too many other things to do. And what I'm talking about when I say we, These were the professionals in Army intelligence and the research and development. We had all von Braun's group with us. These Germans were professionals. I have to give them credit for that. They knew their business. I was very fortunate. I had these men on my team. I had the German documents. I couldn't read German, but I had the advantage. I called the German scientist that worked for me and told them to explain stuff to me. The nearest thing to the flying saucer, they actually built one. It crashed. It went up 12,000 feet. And people don't know it. The nearest thing they had, the electromagnetic envelope, was the Foo Fighter. Did you ever hear the Foo Fighter? No. Yeah, a lot of people heard about it. That's the nearest thing they had. It actually knocked some of our ignition systems out of some of our bombers. They put it in the air. It was around, it twirled, white, made a luminous light. And that was known as the Foo Fighter. Very fortunate, these advances were coming. They had a tank. They could pick up a tank moving over the Earth's grid system. And by magnetic. They were working on an electronic cannon, electromagnetic cannon. So were we. We made one. I have a picture of one. So what actually the outcome of this was that, and we were very fortunate, General Patton's tanks overran their factories. That killed the Foo Fighter program. They were ahead of us. And other things that they were making. Very fortunate, General Patton moved a little too fast for them. Took their factories and destroyed them. But we never took that on as a serious thing. We should have. And I used to get the documents, the German documents, and have my scientists explain them to me. That gave me a great advantage over things. So a lot of the things that you asked, the numbers and so forth, in my opinion, what I know, weren't so. Take them sort of, well, with tongue-in-cheek, based on some truth, but the numbers are all different than anything I ever knew. I wish we had that many bodies that we could have worked with. Maybe I wouldn't have made the mistake of not making a project out of it.
Supposedly, in 1954, President Eisenhower met with a group of aliens at Edward Air Force Base. Are you aware of anything like that?
No. Those meetings they say they had with aliens, that's all fiction. I never knew of anything like that happen, or did I ever know of anybody that participated in any such thing. I never knew of anybody that saw a live alien. Unfortunately, all the ones, the autopsy and the ones I saw, they were dead. That put us at great disadvantage. We couldn't examine the way we should an alien brain when he was brain dead. You see how we missed out, didn't get him quick enough. I never saw a photograph or heard anybody tell me that they saw an alien who had a cut or a bruise or bled, or had a scar or caked blood on him. There's never any such report appeared. Nobody ever saw one. They couldn't, they didn't have any blood. So, you see, when you start examining the real facts, the numbers sort of start fading away. Yes, we had some bodies, but not in the numbers that you named. I wish we did.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Next question.
One of the things that we've learned is to, you were wondering how to fight stupidity, and one of the ways that we've learned is through knowledge and information.
What was that?
And you also said previously that only about 10% of the story has been revealed in your book. When is the other 90%, and how is it going to be disseminated?
He's asking about the other 90%. reinforce some of that you've given tonight, but
Yeah.
he's asking if there's more.
Yeah, there's more. I didn't write everything in this book. I couldn't have. And I didn't care to. Just recently, my own son criticized me. First, he criticized me. He said, 35 years you didn't even tell your family. So my answer to that is, why should I tell you? Why should I tell anybody? In fact, I'll put it this way. Why should an extraterrestrial talk to me? I build weapons to destroy him. He shouldn't give me anything. Then, just lately, my own son, I told him there are implants in the extraterrestrial's brain. And he said, now I know why you wrote in the book that you discussed with General Trudeau. Why, what happens, what are we unleashing on the world? If this thing, transistor and integrated circuit, combines with a human brain, are we going to have a race of monsters? He said, well, Phil, I hope that the people come after us recognize the danger, because we really didn't know where this integrated circuit would lead to in the transistor. And he said, but maybe not in our lifetime. And we hope the people come after us recognize the danger. So my son said, you didn't finish that in your book. You knew that it could be done. I told him, yes. He said, why'd you wait till now to say it? Well, tell me why I should have said it before. I'm not obligated to say that. He said, you kept that quiet too. Now I see that you and General Trudeau knew that it was possible to implant these implants in the brain. We saw them under a microscope. Have you ever seen a boat when it gets electrolysis? The electronics jumps from one electronic unit to another, and it makes a thin strand of salt. And every 6 or 8 inches, it has a little bubble. And electricity goes through that on pleasure boats and ruins electronics. It travels over that salt, and it some way it builds up and leaks right to the other electronic instrument. The implants look something like that. Also, there was an implant in the eye. Our probes, our people go in space, send TV pictures back. There was no communication, no such TV on the flying saucer. How did he communicate with his creators? TV pictures went back to them through his eyes, tied in with the nervous system and the spinal system. I discussed this in the thing I just wrote, the nervous system. We know very little about the nervous system. We don't know enough where even scientists can discuss it, how it really operates. We still don't know. We haven't advanced. I tried this out on my doctor, a surgeon. You're right. He said, we don't know enough about the nervous system. So where are we? Where we are, that we missed out on this. This extraterrestrial was the greatest gift given to us. What did we do? Nothing. One autopsy report I saw, one body. What did I do on it? Nothing, when I should have done something. It's a marvelous thing when you see the way the lymphatic system operates. The liquid in there lubricates all our vertebrae. How's it done? He only had one kidney, one lung, because his creators must have decided he doesn't need this for space travel, and they left him out. And even if you read the Sumerians and things in the history, the extraterrestrials were experts at DNA. A lot of history writes that they created man. And if you read the Sumerian text, the extraterrestrial is known by the Sumerian as an EGG, I-G-I-G-I. And I interpret that as meaning from one, we make two. From one, two, G-I-G-I. And the Sumerians said that they were ferry pilots, is all they were. They were just made to ferry the flying saucer back and forth. Where to, I don't know. Some say the mothership, some say his home base. Other theories are he's a dimensional traveler. He got to know how to withstand the changing dimensions. Possibly true. I've had some good information, talked to some good people about the dimensional and the parallel universe. I think it exists. I think they came through a dimensional gate when they crashed at Roswell. So I know that's going round and round, but these are some of the facts and the question you asked. I can't answer your questions direct because I don't know. So I got to tell you what I know. If you can fit it in, fine. So this is as far as I can go on it. I told you what I know about the body, and I had a hard time lately trying to recollect all I know about it because I read that autopsy report almost 40 years ago. But I think it came out pretty good. At least Jesus thinks I did, and so does Pamela. I showed him the first copy I wrote in my own handwriting. And that EB is a marvelous creation. Not a clone like we talk about. He wasn't created for the future or live forever. He was created for a specific purpose, the pilot of that craft, and to be able to resist and travel in space. Well, I hope I answered you. I don't know if I answered them all, but that's the best I can do for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Next question.
My question sort of piggybacks your last statement. We've been working with human health using water and platinum palladium, and I'm quite interested in your comment about the use of water with a perpetual engine for cars. So I think there's a connection there. We've been using the electrolysis using platinum palladium. Has any mention been made in what you know about that and keeping the brain going?
The deeper we examine the UFO alien phenomenon, the more many of you like myself find the details, leaving disturbing evidence. I want to leave you with a news clip which covers an incident that will certainly remind you of something straight out of Hollywood. The fact that this actually is documented from the CIA as not only happening, but quite literally, defines a level of technology of biblical proportion.
It just posted on its website a single-page summary, there it is, of a hostile encounter between the Russian army and a flying saucer that is said to have occurred sometime between 1989 and 1990. So that's when, according to portions of an extensive 250-page KGB file featuring witness testimony and photographs, detail how 25 Soviet troops were practicing training drills when a, quote, low-flying spaceship in the shape of a saucer, unquote, flew above their base in Siberia. Now, the report states that for unknown reasons, the sighting prompted the men to launch a surface-to-air missile, bringing the craft down.
Wow, this is crazy. So what, in this report, what does it allege the soldiers, what do they do with the aircraft?
I don't think it's what they did with the aircraft. It's what the aircraft or its occupants did with them. So yeah, this is what happened. According to the file, quote, 5 short humanoids with large heads, large black eyes emerged from the wreckage before fusing together into a single object, a spherical shape that emitted a buzzing sound. The report goes on to say the sphere burst into an explosion of white light, leaving 23 of the men, quote, turned into stone poles, unquote, while the remaining 2 that apparently were shielded from the blast by being in the shade escaped unharmed. Now, the bodies of the victims and what was left of the UFO were recovered by the Red Army and taken to a research lab outside Moscow, where it was found that the molecular structure of the men was that of limestone.
What?
So the light that petrified them was a source of energy that officials say is not currently known to humanity.
Whoa. We literally said jaw-dropping at the top of the story. I'm sitting there going, what?
This is a CIA report. We're not making it. This isn't a tabloid, okay?
Okay. So this file that's now declassified by the CIA. I mean, analysts that are looking at this, I mean, it does seem far-fetched, like this is some kind of sci-fi movie. I mean, what do they say about these details?
Right. So in the report, and according to the Independent that reported on the report, an unnamed CIA analyst is quoted as saying, quote, if the KGB file corresponds to reality, well, this is an extremely menacing case. The aliens possess weapons and technology that go beyond all of our assumptions. They can stand up for themselves if attacked. And an ex-CIA agent says if there was an incident, he suspects the actual report doesn't look much like what has come out decades later. You know, perhaps it's been embellished over time. Now, if somebody tried to attack you with a surface-to-air missile, would you retaliate?
I mean, how could you not?
Heck yes!
I mean, yeah, you would. This is crazy.
No, it's crazy.
Turning into limestone, using weapons and lasers that are not even earthly, that are out of this world, literally.